We got both of us. All right. Okay, I'm sure we'll have some people join us a little bit later here. Just want to make sure with everybody, Friday is Good Friday, so everything is due by by Thursday at 5 o'clock because of Good Friday. And you've got the Anderson Chapter 12, got that case, and then we have the that's due, and then the single Burger Dome. That's the key. We talked about it last week. This case, the multiple Burger Dome, that case, the two-server queuing line, that's over in pages 516 through 21. So we'll pop over there, and I think that's going to be 516. So I'll search the book. And page 516, 511, where's it, 516? Okay. And we're still looking at some waiting line models. Now, this one, let's just talk about it for just a few minutes about what we're looking at. In this model, what differs from the single model that we looked at was basically that we've got a queue. We have a queue, a single queue. It's first come, first serve. I'm sure is the discipline on this. And then we have two servers. Okay, so the process is people come in and whatever cashier or whatever ATM or whatever or checkout stand is open, you go right there. Or you go like to McAllister's and get lunch today, you'll go and there will be several people at the counters taking orders, and they'll say next person over here. One of the ways they'll emphasize the queue, a lot of places, McAllister's when it does it, a lot of them do, they'll have a little roped off kind of thing there that kind of moves you around in an L shape. And so this is a little bit different critter. Well, let's talk about this for just a moment in terms of what we see here. We have the customer arrival. Now again, we're working off some probability theories, basically the Poisson theory about when and how customers arrive. We assume that they arrive in waves. And then then folks come into the waiting line, and then they go to either server A or server B, depending upon which server is open. And they leave after the order is filled. Now, you'll notice at the top of this figure 11.3, they've got a thing called the system, and this is the operating system which entails the waiting time, the time that people start waiting to the time people are served, and then once they exit, they're out the system. Now, the system, that boundary there, the little mark, the little hash marks, tells us that we're dealing with two kinds of critters. One, the customer arrival, we really don't have too much control, if any, over that. And so we're always concerned about what's controllable and what's not. And then we have in the system, we do have some control over how fast or how slowly we service somebody. And so they take us down to the operating characteristics, and we look at the arrival rate for the system. This is going to be the folks up here, okay? And then the service rate for each server, okay? And then the number of servers. So we're looking at the arrival rate, then the service rate for each server, and the number of servers. So in a sense, it kind of looks like a little bit in terms of the queue, it kind of resembles the total cost equation. And notice what we're talking about, okay? The variable cost for these folks here and for us is going to be how long they wait, okay? The fixed cost is it kind of mimics the fixed cost. We've got this time to serve these people. So it takes a certain amount of time, and so we have to have equipment and a person, all this stuff to take care of these folks as they come through. Or even if it's automated, there's a cost. So you've got a fixed cost, here a variable cost that depends upon the amount of folks who come in, the waiting line. And waiting lines have to be looked at as a cost for the simple reason people don't like waiting. So they walk us through the operating characteristics to get the average number of units in the waiting line, the average number of units in the system, which is going to be the people in the waiting line, plus those who are being served. And they walk us on over here to the next characteristic, and they show us here over on page 519. Pop back here, see if I didn't go too far. It was 16. All right, let me move this up for a second. It's 18. We're good. Now, let's stop at that for a moment and let's talk about this table 11.4. Okay. Here they give us these are values, as they say, for multiple serving lines with Poisson arrivals and exponential service times. And what they're saying is basically we're going to look at the ratio, okay, and then we'll look at the number of servers. And so that we can take this is almost like if you had when you had let's say when you had intro to finance. And you had a table that said, okay, the number of periods, and then the interest rate, and you go and find the intersection. That would be the future value or the present value of a lump sum, or the factor for the present value or a future value of a lump sum, or the value factor, excuse me, for the present or future value of an annuity. Well, you look here and you see the number of servers, and this gives you those values for those arrival times. So you can plug those data into the equation. They walk us through that with the 2 server, and this is where they get from table 11.4. Okay, and we're looking at. And we go down, we interpolate, we find that 0.45 right here, 2 servers, and we plug that into the equation, and here we get the number of customers, okay, per minute based on the operating characteristics. And this is a table is based upon the probabilities. And then we walk through all building the equations to look at the number of customers, the waiting time per minute, okay, and just basically building that. And these really start to become like constraints, okay. And so they walk us through the average time a customer spends in the system, okay, waiting time plus server time, and the average number of customers, the waiting line, etc., and what we can do to attack them or try to reduce them. Now, in the single case over here, in this multiple burger dome, let's take a look at this for just a second, okay? And first of all, you're going to use the multiple file. The file called multiple from the student files, the Anderson student files for chapter 11. So I'm going to go down, I've got the Anderson files over here somewhere, and I'll go over here and grab them out of chapter 11. And it's the file called multiple. And we'll find this here. Let's scroll down and we get to the Excel files, and here it is, multiple. I'm going to copy it and put it on my desktop. Okay. And let me see if I can find the little jewel. I'm having some troubles of copying it from here. And this is strange. I'd like to know what in the world is going on with this. Let me go back over here. I'll get them again. Because I don't understand why I'm running into this. All right, let's go to chapter 11. And I'm just going to open it up. I'm going to go ahead and enable editing. And we have a security. We're good there. Now, I'm going to go back. I'm going to diminish this down for just a second. I'm going to go back over here, and I'm going to get the prompt. That is what I'm going to ask you to do. And I'll open it back up. And we can just insert a text file or text box. Doesn't matter which one we want to do. Okay. And let's see, I'm going to insert. Here's a text box. I'll go ahead and throw this in here. And you'll want to do that. And then basically bold it up, put it up to a size that you want to see. It's easier to read, etc. Okay. What I'm going to ask you to do is to use the goal seek. Okay. Obtain a probability of 0.12 that an arriving customer has to wait by changing the number of servers. So we're going to change the number of servers, okay, and we're going to try to obtain a probability that the arriving customer has to wait. And so we have this down here in cell C19, okay. And you may want to do that. What I like to do sometimes, just to make sure I'm on the straight and narrow, is the number of servers. That's going to be, and I'll just for my own sake, sometimes I'll just even put it in the cell. It's B2. Okay. And this is all about probability. You know, we've talked about using the management science approach and how we do that. And again, we're using probability to try to figure out how many people, how many people will arrive, how many people will wait, what's the rate of service, etc. And we're trying to use probability theorem to figure this out. Now we assume that when people arrive, they arrive following what we call the Poisson, and the Poisson distribution is one of those like the Gaussian distribution, i.e. the normal curve. But this one is different. It's like stair steps. You kind of have a big rush and then a plateau, and then a lot of activity and then a plateau, activity and a plateau. And a restaurant, stores, anybody that will have a discernible time. There are some companies that have Poisson arrivals or Poisson orders that are seasonal. Let's say that you're somewhere and you have a Christmas tree farm, okay, and you know that come Christmas time, probably starting in Thanksgiving weekend or the after, people if they're gonna want to, let's say if there's people in cities that they want to go buy a live tree, if there are any of those left, you'll want to have everything cut and ready to be sent. So the growing season, all that has to be right on target. If you're selling artificial trees, that's a whole different story. If you're gearing up for the Christmas rush, fine. If you're as a municipality and you're opening up a pool for the summer or recreational facilities, same deal. And so we use that theoretical distribution, or what we would say would be a model of a distribution, to plug these data in, okay? And by the same token, we also use systems theory. You say, what are you talking about? Let me show you, okay? And we'll go back over here. And fine, there it is. Let's go back for a second. Now, they show you a system. They show it demarcate. They show the little dotted lines. Again, here's where we use a model or an approach, and this is how management science works. We say, okay, Burger Dome is a system. If you look at it as a queue, in terms of its queuing, it has a system. It has people who get into the waiting line. These are inputs, okay? Then it has throughputs or processes, that's the servers, and then that has outputs. That is the people who leave after they've gotten their order filled. All right? Now, this part can get complicated over here if we're running a takeout and say sit down operation. So if you're a dine in and then you have a takeout, that's a very complex, and you really almost have to say have two different kinds of systems, because you're trying to balance off people driving up and getting their order filled versus the people sitting out there. One of the issues for you is this: how fast do people eat their food? Now, this I know sounds stupid, but the bottom line is, if you have a rush hour and you haven't planned accordingly for the number of dining stations, you'll have a problem because people won't be able to find a place to sit, and they may not come back. So we would try to build in some type we'd build in a measure for their dining time, assuming that they don't just take off. Here we're assuming they leave after the order's filled, okay? And that's the simplest way. If you look at Starbucks, for example, Starbucks was designed for people to drive through or run in and get coffee. But what they didn't think, the unintended consequence of what they did of having baristas and all of these different kinds of coffees, all that, was that you get in a line and someone goes through all the different things they need done with their coffee. And some people can get pretty elaborate with how they have it. And you're standing there and, 15 minutes later, she still haven't been served. Or you drive up to the curve and you sit and sit and sit and sit waiting while they do that. And because of the quality of their product, because the ambiance they offer, because of whatever they connect with the public, people put up with it. But a lot of other places they wouldn't. So I wanted to make sure that you understood that we're using systems theory here. Now, one of the key points of systems theory, and one of the reasons that we want to take this model that we have and try to use some probability to have a sense of what things will look like at the operating level in terms of time, is that we cannot assume a thing called the equifinality of inputs. And you say, what do you mean by that? Well, let's talk about it for a minute. You got these customers who've come into the waiting line. You're going to have a customer who wants to pay with cash. You're going to have a customer who's bringing in a coupon. The coupon may be valid, it may not. If it's not valid, they're going to be angry, or you're going to have to just take the coupon. You're going to have the customer who comes in with a credit card and it bounces. Okay? You're going to have a customer who comes in and wants to write a check, and you don't take checks. Okay? So you can't assume that they all come in with the same thing. It's just like if you go to a car wash, all right, today you can go to a car wash, and like if you go to the big ones, you put in your credit card. There's nobody having to make change or mess with that. You just put the card in and you get your wash and boom, you're gone. But if you go to one where it's a do-it-yourself, you've got to take all the change with you or go in and use the changer. And there's nothing worse if you've had the experience of going in to wash your own car and you run out of quarters and you go to get change and you can't get more quarters. Which is something that will just drive you nuts. It's the same with toll booths. The 3 years I lived up in Chicago, they have fantastic streets and roads up there. But there's a toll booth every 10 miles. And one of the ways they've decided to pay for the streets and the roads and all that are tollways. And if you don't have exact change, you got a problem. If you pull in and to get from point A to B, as you're say maybe going into the city or coming out of the city, you're looking at, you get off at a certain place, it's $2.15. If all you have is a 5, it will take your 5, gobble your 5, and you will get no change because it's exact change only. So how do they solve it? Well, the reason they're doing that is to get you to buy a Pike Pass, just like we sell them here in Oklahoma. And I tell you what, I guarantee you up there, when I started driving, if I got a Pike Pass, so I didn't have to worry with having the change of the money or all that. So we can't assume that these three are equivalent, okay? And we can't assume in reality that the service time is going to be the same. So we try to build some measures like the average serving time using the tables, the number of servers that we have, and we try to do a good guesstimate. Now, what you'll do when you're actually operating is you'll measure that the best you can, and then you'll try to say, okay, here's what we planned for, here's what we're seeing. Do we consistently see it? Do we see consistent differences in the servers? If you're using human servers, they're trained, they may not respond well. One of them may do a good job at the training you provide, the other may not. So this is a pretty simplistic model, okay? And it's a model. And one of the reasons we use it is because it starts to drive us towards questions of, okay, the model says I've got the problem solved with the number of servers and our expectations on how fast they're served, etc. But you remember there's a difference between problem solving and decision making. We may have to make some decisions about the system and about the system components, especially in these two components of the system, each server. And that's just a reality we have. So as I said before, this material on waiting lines would be an entire course, because they just get more and more complex as you build the system out further. Well, let's go back over here for a second. We'll open this back up. And so one of the things I'll do is I'll say, okay, changing the number of servers, and I know that's going to be B2. And so I'll put some brackets around it here just to remind myself which cell I'm working with, okay? And then I want to obtain a probability an arriving customer has to wait by changing the number of orders. So I've got B2 is the number of servers, okay? And then the outcome that I want is a probability arriving customers have to wait. So that's going to be B19. And I'll just go ahead and put another little bracket there, remind myself I'm looking at B19. And then I do the goal seek. Now, I also ask you to use goal seek to obtain a probability of 0.04 that an arriving customer has to wait by changing the number of servers. Now, why am I doing this? Well, you can see that we're trying to deal with a controllable factor, and that is the number of servers, okay? And by doing that, we say, okay, how does that impact the probability that an arriving customer has to wait? Now, what I want to see you do is, do both of these, get the probability 0.12 versus 0.04, and I want to see them in two different tabs, okay? And then maybe some verbiage that says, all right, what happened? Because we're doing some trade-off here, and we're trying to figure out. Well, we're just going to try to run up the number of servers and see how many it takes to get us to a point where we have a solution, and we're going to use the goal seek to do that. Okay. Now, beyond that would become some questions like, okay, what does each service station cost?
Hey, there you are.
Okay, we're assuming that that time is imperative for us, and it is. And so I've got some resources for you to take a look at. We'll look at them here in just a moment. But that's pretty much the crux of what you're going to be doing with the multiple burger dome problem. And again, the math, the model, and all of that are intended to provoke questions on our part And for example, if we have two servers, how sure can we be that that both servers are equally trained if they're people? And we would want to do something, this is going to sound a little strange, but we would even want to go back and do receipt audits for each of those service stations to see if there was some significant differences between what people, what orders are being, what orders are being handled by one server or another, okay? You say, what's that going to tell you, or what's the point? The point is this. Let's go back for a moment. I want to show you. We're assuming that our queue discipline is first come, first served, okay? And you know today, even if it's only at the very nicest restaurant where they don't give you a number at your table and you sit down. You eat anywhere else today, they give you a number. You take the number and you put it in a little thing so they know what order goes where. Okay? And the servers have a little queue. They know what area they're covering. So you'd want to say, all right, well, are there significant differences between the types of orders filled at server A versus server B? If you assume you're doing a first come, first served type of queue environment or discipline, you should expect that they would have fairly parallel types of receipts, or there should be some type of equivalence there. All right. If there's not, you want to dig into it and see why. And it may be that for some reason, say server A gets some really big or complicated orders to handle. And then while those people are being taken care of, two people go through the line and get taken care of by server B, or vice versa. That starts to give you a sense of, all right, is there any way we can try to control that so we get some kind of equivalence in terms of the number of orders flowing through? Now we can build the mathematical models, but then it becomes an issue of the true operating characteristics. What are we looking at? And this is, if you have, when you have drive-in and dine-in, it becomes very, very complex. So the next time you go stop at a fast food place, okay, or the next time you go to a restaurant, all right, think about this. Ask yourself, how do they handle the arrival? Be mindful of that. Do they seat me? Do they make me wait before I'm seated, or I just go and sit down? All right. How do they handle my waiting time? Do they try to sell me hors d'oeuvres? Do they try to sell me drinks? If they're smart, they'll say, okay, well, what can we get you to drink, that kind of thing. And this is while it may not reduce your waiting time, your perception of the waiting time goes down. And many restaurants will sell like hors d'oeuvres or appetizers at a reduced cost, so they'll get you, so they can keep you feeling like you're not waiting forever to get your food. Because if you start feeling like you're waiting forever to get your food, you're like most people, you'll get up and you leave. So that's pretty much an overview of what we're looking at there. And again, here are the operating characteristics. And they'll walk us through the math of all of that, and then we're back again. And then we have the values. Then we have the ratio, and then we walk through the number of servers, and we build that in, and they will show us how to use the table here at the bottom. And again, this is not too different from a time value money table. And you're usually, when you've taken finance, you've had 4 of them. One for future value lump sum, one for future value, one for future value lump sum, one for present value lump sum, one for a future value of an annuity, and one for the present value of an annuity. And away you go. Again, based on probability. They show us the equation. So that's pretty much what I'm after for you as far as working with that case. Now, I want to spend a little time today also talking about some of these other resources that are here. And I have always resisted the temptation, and trust me, it's always been one, to give everybody a quiz over stuff like this to make sure you read it or look at it. I offer these resources here for you for a very simple reason. I'm going to assume that you know you pay a lot to go to school. And I'm going to assume that you know there's a lot more that you can learn about this than you can from the textbook, that there are a lot of these kind of subtopics or sub-questions that you might want to dive into. At the very least, I try to provide you two types of resources. One, a very practical kind of use of this tool or this approach that we're studying, and the other is a theoretical foundation on which it's built. And I do that for a reason. The reason is so that you understand that the best companies, that the best managers use these approaches because it helps them build operating discipline. And here's one. I've spoken before about it, and we'll go out here and we'll take a look at it. All right. And they're talking about this 10 minutes that changed Southwest Airlines' future. Here's the deal. When Southwest Airlines understood, well, every airline company knows this. Every minute that a plane sits on a tarmac, they're losing money. Planes are expensive, and you got to have them operating. So let's say, for example, I pay $100 million for an airplane. Okay, I'll just keep the math simple, and I assume that I'm going to get, let's call it 10,000 hours of flight time out of that plane. So it's not unreasonable because it's about 200 hours a week. Okay. And so now the plane cost me $100 million, and I'm just doing simple math here. 10,000 hours of flight. Let's make it 5,000 just to really keep it just a conservative estimate. So you can do the math on how much an hour that plane cost me. Now you could say, well, it costs you that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Yes. But the payback is the number of hours that plane is in the air with people in it. The reason you can get such cheap tickets to a lot of flights is simple. They're going to fly there anyway. It's on their schedule. And at that point, the fixed cost is so great that they can, if they're going to lose money, they just soon have you on the plane so they lose less money. Airline industry is an extremely difficult and very competitive industry because it's highly capital intensive, and the major carriers have really failed to do a good job of differentiating themselves. Instead, letting what differentiates them is where you're headed. Okay? So I have that resource there for you so that you can look at what Southwest did in terms of turnaround time. Okay? Let's get ourselves back out there for just a second. So I have that for you to look at that. And it gives you some insights about the founding of Southwest. But they really changed the game because they understood the faster they can turn a flight around, the longer that plane's in the air, the more money they make. Originally, one of the other things that they did was very clever. It was a pricing tactic. They said, okay, we're going to charge people to fly from point A to B for what typically it would cost for them to drive. Okay? So if it's going to cost me in terms of gas $100 to drive from Oklahoma City to Dallas, you know, I'm going to be paying $100 to fly there. Okay. Now, they're not taking into account, you know, rental cars and all that stuff, but they said we're going to go point A to point B, and we're going to try to keep that as a price standard to have people, to encourage people to fly short hops. So that's a good resource there for you to take a look at, and one that I think is really important for you to look. Then I have another one, and this is a frozen food manufacturer, and what they're trying to do to reduce their WIP, and that is their work in process. Okay, work in process is exactly what it says. It's stuff I'm working on. I'm mixing the stuff for ice cream batches, or I'm cleaning the car, or I'm whatever that process is. It's not finished. It's a work in process. So I don't have a finished service good bundle or a finished service, or pardon me, or a furnished good. So here is an excellent article that talks about how this frozen food manufacturer, there's two parts to it, reduce their work in process. And by doing that, save themselves a ton of money and help themselves in terms of having their manufacturing processes aligned with what the market wanted. So it's pretty easy. It should be pretty easy being a frozen food dealer, manufacturer, because you make the stuff, you freeze it, and you send it to the stores. That's true, okay? But it's easy, if you're not careful, to have product out there that's out of date. Or the other thing you got to consider is this. You've got product that's being handled by a retailer for you, for example, and if they don't handle it well, you open up the food and they didn't have the temperatures it should be, et cetera, and you open up that thing to microwave it or whatever, or put it in the oven, and you've got icicles all over it, or it's rotted. So you have to have a tight control over those processes. This is, again, one of these I think is worth your time to take a look at. Just simply as the fact that you're going to go out there and do this for a living. This is not much different than, folks, if you were getting an art degree. I can tell you now that the faculty over in art would say, you really need to go look at art. You need to go visit museums. You need to go visit art galleries. You need to see what people are doing so you can have a sense of what the lay of the land looks like out there, and that you get ideas for your own work. It's the same way for all of you. Business is an art as much as it is a science. And if you're not, when you walk into an establishment, if we've done our job here, you should start looking around, asking yourself, where do they get their inventory? Where do they keep it? How do they handle service inputs? Where's the places I pay to get checked out? Where do I get checked out at? What does the inventory look like? Does it look like someone's keeping it straight? Is it clean? Is it nice? Is the environment conducive to me wanting to shop there? The lighting, etc. The food, does it come out on time? Is the food good? Do I get an accurate rendition from the server about what they had for a special today? If you sit in a restaurant and the server barks out the special and you're sitting there going, I don't get it, well, maybe they've missed a sale opportunity. So you want to try to start to get yourself in a mode where you're watching. The best entrepreneurs in the world are people who are always looking for a better way to do things. They're always looking for that. I've got some resources here for you also in terms of Starbucks, its waiting time and trying to run lean operations. And then some more theory, basic waiting line models, the Poisson distribution, what is that? And one of Excel's, what they call the normal distribution function, where they try to look and say, okay, is this distribution, does it approximate a normal distribution, or the opposite of it, where we do the inverse of it? is it not fitting with that? And the norm inverse function in Excel and how you use it. So I've got resources here for you, okay? And I hope that you'll study them. Now, I have never ever used these as test material or quiz material for the simple reason, as I said before, number one, I'm not going to insult your intelligence. I think you're smart enough people to go, wow, if he's put this in here for me to look at, maybe it's something I need to see. And number two, you pay a lot of money to go to school. And when I have students tell me, well, you know, the classes, you know, the other textbook, but can you show me some stuff from the real world? Well, okay, here you are. That's what will start to differentiate you from just the average person out there applying for a job, okay, even as a student, versus the person who a prospective employer is going to say, I have somebody who thinks like an owner. I have somebody who thinks like an entrepreneur, who thinks like an enterprise thinker would. And that's a person who thinks like an owner and who understands what that means and understands the risk that a business takes to get started up and going and all of that. So these are some extra things for you to take a look at. And again, I would encourage you as you're out now and as we're looking at waiting lines, you know, go out and study that and take a look at it. Now, there are various ways that you can overcome those, and we've talked about some of those. And one of the reasons that you have, particularly with fast food people and just restaurants, folks like that, or anybody that's a retailer, they'll fill your phone full of coupons, blah, blah, blah. They'll even try to get you to order before you show up so that they know what the queue looks like, and they're just not flying blind. I can't tell you how eminently practical this stuff is, how important it is for you to understand, and the opportunities that are out there for people to say, I'm kind of curious about this. When people do people arrive at restaurants differently than they do a McDonald's or a Jack in the Box? Do people arrive at Walmart differently than they do at a mall, like the mall over in Norman, and say maybe over at, I guess, at Dillard's? Do people arrive to come into the theater in a Metroplex, a big theater with like 10 or 12 shows? Do they arrive? Are their arrival patterns different when they come to get their tickets? Are their arrival patterns different when they come to buy food, junk food that the people there want to sell you? Okay? And hopefully to get you thinking about that. If I do, and I've gotten you inquisitive, and then this gives you it gives you an opportunity to build on the course in some ways that I could never do for you, because this has to be for you a personal quest. It has to be something that you think about. And I can tell you now, if you're working, for example, in a manufacturing facility or your assembly facility, or if you're working at an insurance company, or you're working at a financial institution, these models still apply. They still rule. And there's still things that you have to think about. If you're a real estate agent, you've got to be concerned about it. How fast, if I find a person who qualifies for a home, how fast can I get their loan closed? How fast can I get them to closing? They sign the date, they bring a certified check, and we've got a house sale. Because you don't have a sale and you don't have a commission until that happens. And folks that are in the mortgage business, especially mortgage originators or closers, are very concerned about things like how fast the flow is to get paperwork over to them. And they're doing everything they can to shorten that process so that eventually their goal is to get things down to the point where it will take you about as long to buy a house as it does to buy a car. If you buy a car today, you know, especially if you're buying a new one or a fairly new one, well, you go to any place, and you're financing it, you'll go back to the back and they'll have you fill out paperwork and this and that. And they can get the process down to as much as little as maybe 45 minutes or an hour, depending on your credit reports, etc. Well, folks that sell homes want to get things down to the same point, because a lot of things can happen when somebody looks at a house and says, yeah, I'd like to buy it. And there are even people out there, if they've put some money down, they may walk on a deal. And if you look at the price of a home, okay, you start to ask yourself, all right, how much money do I, as a loan originator or realtor or any of the other people who get into the game, how much do they lose if we don't handle this fast enough? So this is stuff that really is important for you to take a look at. And I can't do anything except to encourage you to do it. And I wouldn't insult your intelligence by testing you over this, because I think you're smarter to say, I want to have a little bit of a leg up on everybody when I'm out there applying for a job. And the way you do is you start to look at this stuff and you get your curiosity operating. And I just can't tell you that more than anything is your level of curiosity about how something works, how a company, where do they get their customers? How do they bundle their service and product bundle? How do they handle problems or issues? How do they monitor their external environment, etc.? All of those kinds of things are things that you have to start ingesting those in an intellectual sense and also in a gut sense. So you can walk in, when you do it enough years, you'll be able to walk into a place and kind of figure out quickly how they do it. And if you're going to be in business, and if business is a competitive game, which it is, okay, then you're a lot like a coach in a sport who would be stupid if you don't have game film on everybody you're going to play, or if you're not always looking for a new and better way to do things, or you're trying to find some better metrics to measure people's performance, etc., or you're trying to find better ways for people to train or nutrition systems. So I really encourage you to take a look at these. And we've gone here and we've done our 50 minutes, but I hope that this is not lost on you, and I hope I may get you curious. There's some incredibly smart ways that people get customers, some incredibly clever ways that they take care of customers and market to them, and start to think about these waiting line systems and how those all work and play out. You got a whole world of that out there to look at. Well, folks, thank you much. I'm going to call it a day, and have a safe Good Friday if you're traveling somewhere. And I will have a broadcast on Wednesday. Thanks a lot.